Hello and welcome to Inside Sports. I'm your host, Todd Blackstock. On today's show, we're going to head down to the Scott Trade Center in downtown St. Louis for exclusive coverage of the Mid-States Club Hockey Association's Challenge Cup. We'll also be joined in studio by the Vice President of Missouri Hockey Incorporated, Jeff Hayes. And our Inside Sports crew is on the scene for Arch Madness as we get an inside look at some of the excitement generated by this year's Missouri Valley Conference Tournament. So stay tuned for this and much more coming up next on Inside Sports. And welcome to the show. The Missouri Valley has been holding their conference tournament in St. Louis since 1991. And as always, our Inside Sports crew is on the scene for the exciting action. Let's check out the madness with Inside Sports reporter Angela Sharp.
Came to town for the Arch Madness, the games here. What do you think of St. Louis?
I like St. Louis. It's a lot different from where we're from.
How is it different?
In Cedar Falls, it's kind of all condensed in one area. Here we can spread out and do a lot of different activities, which is a lot of fun.
So where have you been since you've been here in St. Louis?
Our hotel, the Arch, Hardee's, Jimmy John's, a tortilla place that I have no idea what they said at all, but it was really good.
And a bunch of bars, right?
No, I'm 18 years old.
No bars for you then?
No bars.
All right, and where are you from?
Kokomo, Indiana.
All right, so you're here, you're visiting St. Louis for Arch Madness. What do you think of St. Louis so far?
Oh, beautiful facilities. I mean, everything's easy to get to, in and out of. They put on a great venue right here. I couldn't dang it.
Now, you've been enjoying the basketball. Have you been able to check out anything else while you're here?
We went on a couple tours and a lot of restaurants downtown. We got plenty of food here in St. Louis.
We are in a great geographic location. We have 6 teams to the east of the Mississippi, 4 to the west. It really is an event for our fans. They look forward to it every year. St. Louis is so welcoming. Great hotel community, great restaurants, and in a lot of ways, our tournament, to me, always feels like a big family reunion that has a basketball tournament played in conjunction with it.
Yeah, I would say this one has the top of them all going to the NCAA tournament. There's not a better feeling. Yeah, conference championship games are always going to be dogfights. 2 very talented teams on the floor with a lot to lose and everything to gain, so you're going to get everybody's best shot. I just had to read and react to the defense. I went hard left and he cut me off pretty hard, and I changed directions and went to the right and it opened up, so I had to take the shot.
Tremendous experience to watch him grow, as a player and as a person. And to watch that last shot go in was just amazing. We're very proud of him, happy for him.
Can't tell you enough how proud I am of these kids.
Well, I think it was a great tournament. We had outstanding attendance, and we had 8 of 9 games were really, really close, including the championship, and that speaks for itself. Ball on the rim with zeros on the clock, goes in, dream finish for certainly for Northern Iowa, and tough loss for Evansville.
I think we had a great tournament. I mean, it's unique in a conference basketball tournament when you have 8 of your 9 games are 1-possession games, and anytime you have a buzzer beater to end it, you've got tragedy on one end and exhilaration on the other. We had better than 50,000 for a 15th straight year. Great drama in all of our games. It was a successful Arch Madness 2016.
Oh, I think it was a total success in every way. We drew big crowds. Southern Illinois is back in the hunt, so to speak. They brought a good following to St. Louis, as all of our teams did, really, and couldn't ask for a better environment in the arena. The Scott Trade Center does a great job with this event, and we're looking forward to coming back here through 2020.
a lot of fun. Angela Sharp from the Scott Trade Center. Back to you, Todd.
Well, 9 out of the 10 games in this year's Missouri Valley Conference tournament were decided by one possession, and the other a game winner on a buzzer beater. A couple of weeks later, Michigan State gets knocked out in the first round in St. Louis. Syracuse ends up in the Final Four, and everyone will remember the national championship game this year as Villanova defeated North Carolina at the buzzer. Well, it's a testament to St. Louis that Arch Madness will remain in our city at least through 2020. Well, our region is also becoming a hotbed for hockey, and the Mid-States Club Hockey Association's Challenge Cup recently took place at the Scott Trade Center as well. And videographer Jerry Berwin and myself were on the scene. Let's go inside this year's championship game with CBC taking on St. Louis U High. The 2016 Mid-States Club Hockey Association Championship Series provided excitement and enthusiasm in front of a raucous crowd at the Scott Trade Center in downtown St. Louis. This year's championship game featured the Junior Billikens of St. Louis University, winning 17 of 24 games in the regular season, taking on the undefeated CBC Cadets. CBC lit the lamp first with this wrister from Ethan Stahlhuhn, who gets the glad hand from his teammates. Seconds into period number 2, Bud Winter, who had 29 goals this season, jukes the SLU defenseman for this acrobatic score to make it 2-0 Cadets and is mobbed by his teammates. In the third period, the Junior Bills cut it to 4-2 on this power play goal from the top of the key by Christian Berger, and the SLU High faithful rejoice with hope of coming back. But the Cadets' Jack Harrison tips in this empty netter as time expires to seal a 5-2 victory, and the celebration begins.
It couldn't mean more to me with Jack Harrison scoring that goal. He's been my line mate the past 2 years. I play with him on my other team too, on my club team, and I just love the kid to death.
What an incredible atmosphere. You reached the championship and you took home the hardware tonight. How does it feel?
It's great. I don't even know how to describe it. I love my team. Every single kid in that locker room is just a great kid, and we all worked our hardest and got the job done tonight.
CBC head coach John Jost has had a tremendous run with cadet hockey, winning 3 state championships in a row and 11 out of 16. And Coach Jost realizes the finality of each year's state championship game.
Yeah, this is it. For 6 months, I mean, we start, tryouts in early September, and it's 6 months, and it's a grind. And a lot of these guys play on other teams. Sometimes they're on the ice 8 and 9 times a week. So to be able to have this night and finish it off with this, it's been a long season, so I'm really, really happy for these kids.
Coach Jost knows that playing at the Scott Trade Center is special.
I think playing in this building is special for these kids. I mean, they don't get to do this every day. So to be able to come down here and play, and the Blues do what they do for the league and everything else. We've got a good league, and without that we have nothing. So yeah, it's special for them.
Yeah, it was. It's the first time it's been on a Friday night in a long time, I think, and it was really good. There was great crowds, great atmosphere. It was just unbelievable.
What is it about CBC that's so dominating in hockey?
Well, it's steep tradition, and when you get that type of tradition out there, I mean, you get a lot of the good players, and it does not. I mean, you can't say enough about what John Jost does for that program. I mean, year after year, he's there. He always seems to get it right, and his teams are always competitive. They're always tough. They're always hard-fighting teams. There's not much more you can say about John Jost other than the fact that he's a winner.
Dating back to 1996, private schools have won the Challenge Cup 19 out of the last 21 years.
It's tough for a public school to contend with the private schools, because the private schools get to pull from the other areas, and the public schools have to actually, they're dealt the hand that they're actually dealt. The kids that are in their school and in their district, that's the ones they get. That's the one they got to use.
With organizations like Mid-States Club Hockey Association, St. Louis has become a hotbed for NHL talent.
St. Louis hockey has grown with leaps and bounds over the course of the last 10, 15 years. The kids coming out of the programs now, out of all the programs, the junior programs, the selects programs, all good coaches coaching these programs. Kids are top-notch coming out, and they're known nationally. It's not just the good local kids anymore. Now they're known as good national teams and good national products that are coming out of these organizations.
Who will emerge from this year's crop of outstanding high school hockey players? Any final thoughts? Anybody you want to give kudos to?
My parents, I love you guys.
I want to thank everybody that's helped out on the board, and all the parents for doing everything they do to get the kids involved in hockey around the St. Louis area, and they keep the effort moving forward.
Anybody you'd like to give any special recognition to, or any final thoughts?
I do. I think Jack Caruso. I'm real happy for him. He's earned every bit of it. And I'd also like to mention my parents are here tonight. Haven't seen a game all year long. They've had some health issues, and they're here tonight. And I wanted to win that game for them more than anything in the world. So, yeah, great night.
It's very moving that James Jost Sr. got to see his son and CBC win one more title before leaving this world. Well, joining us now in studio is the Vice President of Missouri Hockey Incorporated and a true leader in amateur hockey in the region. At this time, we'd like to welcome Jeff Hayes to Inside Sports. Jeff, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're coming out of the story on the Challenge Cup this year. Mm-hmm. It was a tremendous tournament, as it always is, but in the finality of it, James Jost Sr. passes away just a couple of weeks after the game, and you could see John at the very end of the story there, kind of like, maybe, I don't know, tearing up, but becoming a little bit emotional. Said his parents had been in ill health, and James Sr. got to see John do it one more time. How important was that to CBC and in hockey in the region?
Watching that kind of left a lump in my throat too. 4 weeks, I think, to the day that, or a couple days after that, Mr. Jost passed away, just about 2 weeks ago, as we sit here today, and just across the board, you can't find a better individual, not just in hockey, but in business and life, and that's who Mr. Jost was. I mean, and for John to thank them and basically say, I'm glad they were here. I'm glad they were there too, and I made it a point. I ran into Mr. and Mrs. Jost that night and said hi to them, and kind of went out of my way to do it. Everything happens for a reason. I'm really glad that I did. But one of the stories at Mr. Jost's funeral that Jim Jr. had told in the eulogy was that a young man was at a private school that wasn't CBC, and as most people know, the Josts are intertwined with CBC, and as no other family in that school is, as far as the Josts go. But there was a kid about 12 years ago that was attending another private school, and Mr. Jost had found out over the summer that young man was going to have to leave that school due to some financial constraint from his father losing his job. Mr. Jost found out, didn't say anything to anybody, but contacted the dean of the school and the father and said, it's not right for this young man to have to leave this school. I'll take care of his bill for his senior year, and he footed the bill and didn't tell anybody about it. So that's just one of the many, many stories of Mr. Jost, how generous he was. I think every player in the past 4 decades that have played anywhere outside of St. Louis and anywhere in St. Louis for that matter have a lot to owe to Mr. Jost, whether they know it or not. All the players we have at the higher levels now, a lot of them either went through the Junior Blues program in town. Some of them were fortunate enough to go through the CBC program, and he was a strong supporter of just amateur hockey in general in St. Louis. Yeah,
I understand he was a great guy all around. My stepdad, Bob Donahue, he owned a company, and he worked with James Jost, and he knew him, and he was like, he was a great guy to work with. When you were on my radio show on KFNS 590 The Fan, I said something like, we've got about a minute left. Can you give us maybe a story about James Jost Sr.? You're like, I could sit here and talk all day about him. The one thing I did mention, he'd been with CBC since about, I think, 1976, and had been kind of in charge of the hockey operations there with CBC from that time on. But it wasn't just that. He was a lot more broader than just CBC.
Yeah, he was instrumental in building the rink at Afton. He was instrumental. He basically bought the Junior Blues team in the mid-'80s and kept junior hockey around in St. Louis and throughout the '80s, '90s, and the early 2000s and into what it exists today. His vision with the Junior Blues was that there was enough, and for those that don't know, the Junior Blues is a Tier 3 Junior A program right now. It used to be a Junior B program, but it's partially funded by ownership and partially funded by the players that have to pay to play. And Mr. Jost always kept it extremely affordable for every player that came through that program. It was top notch when I played in that program in the early 90s. We flew every trip that we went on. We never took a bus. And we were the envy of the league. So not only that, but his vision in keeping it mostly local kids was unlike anywhere in the country. You see teams that compete with the Junior Blues even to this day have players from all over the country that play on those teams, and 98% of the players on the Junior Blues were St. Louis born kids. So, and that was the way Mr. Jost wanted it, and that's the way it was, and it was successful for many, many years, in that fashion. So it was great.
And how important do you think it was to the family and the CBC family as well that the St. Louis Blues owner Tom Stillman put out a release and a big statement about it? He was very important to the St. Louis Blues organization as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, a season ticket holder probably since the Blues came here. I don't know the exact year, but I can't imagine that Mr. Jost didn't have tickets in the early 70s. And Tom in the Blues and the Blues organization, the ownership group, knowing many of them, they are great people. They realize that, hey, we lost one of the good ones, and that was just a class move, and it's from a class organization and a class gentleman and Mr. Tom Stillman to put that release out too about Mr. Jost.
Now, you're a pretty good hockey player in your own right, and you went through the CBC program, and somehow you fell between the cracks between the Josts, but I understand you garnered yourself a state championship as well during your playing days.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough in '93, which was my junior year. When I was a freshman in the early 90s, DeSmet was the hot topic. We say, well, CBC's been there the last 12, 15 years, and it was the same way with DeSmet when I went to CBC. So it was a big deal to overcome that mountain that DeSmet had built in the early 90s when I played, and I was fortunate enough to win a championship there in 1993.
Now, you stayed in hockey since your time as a player, and you're still playing to this day.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to skate with the Blues alumni on a weekly basis, so that's fun. Everybody says, why do we do what we do? I have 2 daughters myself. They all ask, well, do your kids play hockey? Mine don't. Neither one of my daughters do, even though girls hockey is a growing segment of our game. But the way I look at it and the way a lot of our board members look at it is somebody did it for us, and that's, we're carrying the torch, much like Mr. Jost carried the torch. All the Jost boys, the Jost family, they're carrying the torch that Mr. Jost carried, and many, many other people, including my grandparents that were instrumental in the early days of Mid-States hockey and worked with Missouri youth hockey. So, it's like that in any other sport. There's people that have to donate their time and volunteer to create the opportunities for the young men, young women to have the opportunities that they have, and it's just one thing I enjoy doing.
Now, Mid-States was formed back in, 45 years ago or something like that?
Yeah, 71.
Yeah, and Bill Frederick was a gentleman that was very instrumental in getting it up off the ground.
Mm-hmm. Bill Frederick was, the way I understand it, he was an executive with Emerson. The Blues came in '67, so they had been around for 4 or 5 years, and Emerson had a group that wanted to have community involvement with youth sports. He pitched the idea for Emerson to donate some money for the startup clubs to have financial responsibility to help get equipment and start up ice and whatnot. So Bill Frederick was instrumental in getting the program off the ground, and I think he took care of it for about the first 4 or 5 years, and then we just kind of morphed along and formed a board, and many of the same people that were involved. Charlie Busenhart from SLU was involved in the early days of Mid-States, and he's still involved today. So
now you were a former president or vice president of Mid-States?
Yes, I served as president for 6 years.
6 years, and now you're the vice president of Missouri Hockey Incorporated.
Correct, and then I serve on the board as a voting board member of Mid-States as past president.
All right, let's talk about Mid-States. You have your tournament series every year, and you've got the Challenge Cup. It's the top tier, and then you have the Wickenheiser Cup, which it kind of seems like is turning into maybe like the public school championship, because it's really tough for the public schools to come in and face the CBCs and the DeSmets and some of the private schools. As Tony Sheeran said in my story there, the private schools can recruit and find players to come there, where the public schools are dealt the players that they have. But looking at this year's Wickenheiser Cup, there was some pretty impressive athletes out there. Kelly Chase had a couple of kids in the
Yeah.
game. Rick Zombo's son was out there as well. And, every year it seems like one of the public schools tries to make a run, but it's a pretty tough nut to crack when you're going up against the CBCs, the SLUs, the DeSmets, et cetera.
Yeah, we get asked all the time, is there a way to create parity, and we do the best we can. And it's no different in any other sport, in football, soccer, baseball. And when you say they have the opportunity to recruit, that's not really, I wouldn't use that term, but they do pull from all over the city. And like Tony said, success breeds success sometimes, and it's been cyclical. Like DeSmet was in the same position. There's been public schools that have had great runs and great teams. Parkway Central was one of them back in the early 90s that had unbelievable teams. Kirkwood's had unbelievable teams.
Parkway South.
Yeah, Parkway South went, and throughout the mid-90s, they won, I think, 3 years in a row after I graduated from high school. So there have been public schools that have challenged for it. We've made some adjustments in our league. A couple years ago, we changed the Challenge Cup. It used to be the top 16 teams. We went to the top 12 teams just to make it a little bit more competitive, because we thought there was more parity between the top 12 than there were the top 16. So we made that change going into our playoffs, and that seems to have benefited us quite a bit. But, that Wickenheiser Cup game, that championship's just as important for those players as the Challenge Cup is. And then our third division, the Founders Cup, you drive out to Chesterfield the Friday night before, and you'll see that championship means a lot to those kids too. So, we'll keep the same 3 championships. Not really sure if we'll adapt with some of the times over the course of the next couple of years, but we'll see how things go.
St. Louis is becoming a hotbed for hockey. You saw the shot of Ben Bishop, Paul Stosny. A lot of Blues players, after their careers ended, have stayed in St. Louis and made hockey and junior hockey and amateur hockey a priority. You see some of the players coming up, and one of the top North American players in this year's NHL draft could be Matt Tkachuk, the son of Keith Tkachuk. Can you maybe talk a little bit about him? And I know there's a young man from Illinois that's considered a possible first-round pick in the NHL draft. Can you believe a couple of guys from St. Louis considered in the, several, 6 or 7 in the top 40 in North America? That's amazing.
Yeah, right now I think it stands at, as far as North American skaters go, we have 5 in the top 40. And then 2 goaltenders in the top 25. So 7 kids that are born and raised in St. Louis, playing hockey in St. Louis, grew up playing their formative years. Matt Tkachuk, I think he left home when he was 14 and went to the North American Development Program. So there's quite a few kids. Yesterday, we had the USA Hockey release the men's under 18 team. We have 5 players on that as well, and some of them are, some that you mentioned, but it's grown leaps and bounds, and the Blues alumni, have done a tremendous amount of work, and they all have given their time back to the game. But there's a lot of other factors too. I think the other thing that goes into it is, as generationally, as we grew up, the higher levels that we play, like guys my age that are approaching 40, all played at higher levels. Well, you get higher coaching with higher levels. Therefore, guys come back, they give that education back to the game in their hometown. And I think that has a lot to do with it too. Yes, the Blues alumni, they all give back, and they've all been visible, and they've, like Keith Tkachuk's helped with Matt's teams, Al McInnes. You can see Chris Pronger at Hardy's Iceplex on a weekly basis, helping with teams, Jim Campbell, Jamie Rivers, et cetera, et cetera. But I think a lot of it also, there's a lot of guys behind the scenes that have played at higher levels and have come back and given back to the game that help in that development too.
With all this energy right now and momentum going with St. Louis hockey, I find it unfortunate there's some possible rink closings, because I'm not sure that there's an abundance of ice rinks here in St. Louis and the region, because a lot of times people that want to play hockey, to get ice time, you've got to play at sometimes, at 11 o'clock at night or 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning. Those ice times are so important. I've heard that the Chesterfield, the Hardy's Ice Complex in Chesterfield, and then perhaps out at the mall that's closing down, the one in North County.
The Mills, yeah.
The Mills, that we could possibly be losing a couple of ice rinks. How devastating would that be to the momentum that we've generated already, and is there possibly more rinks to be built?
There's a couple things in the works. Just got confirmation last week that the Mills for the foreseeable future is safe. So that's one ice surface that we have that we can bank on for the next couple of years. What you said about Hardy's Iceplex, that's definitely true. There have been interested suitors in the land that rink sits on. The gentleman that owns the property there, the way I understand it, purchased it as an investment. He's kept it open, kept it operational as an ice rink for the past 12 to 15 years. And there's a very interested suitor in that property right now. What we've been told on the Missouri hockey side and the mid-state side is that we'll have ice until April 1st of 2017. Once that date comes, there's some uncertainty there, and we're not really sure where that'll lead us. But currently we have 21 ice surfaces in St. Louis area, and losing 3 represents 15% of the ice surfaces we have, and that would be detrimental. There are 2 projects right now that are kind of in the works. One is in Chesterfield Valley along Highway 40, not too far from the existing Hardy's Iceplex. That's going to need some financial vehicles to be utilized through the city of Chesterfield. Hopefully we'll get that working. The election was yesterday, and I know there was a turn of some city council seats there. So hopefully we'll get that working towards a successful project here in the next 6 months. That's the timeline that the group has put on it. And then St. Louis County has been approached to allow a group to assist in a facility in Maryland Heights. So hopefully both of those come to fruition, because right now the way we sit with the 21 ice surfaces that we have, we could really use 3 now, not losing 3. So there's going to be some rough waters ahead as far as ice time goes, and like you said, practicing at 11 o'clock at night. A lot of the senior men's teams play at 11 o'clock at night, and some teams might have to not play in order to get ice for our youth players. And so it's rocky waters ahead for sure.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us here at Inside Sports. You're a true ambassador to youth hockey here in the St. Louis area and the Class Act as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's our show for today. We'd especially like to thank the Missouri Valley Conference, Mid-States Hockey Club Association, and our Inside Sports crew for making this show possible. I'm Todd Blackstock. Thanks for watching Inside Sport. And don't forget to check out my radio show on KFNS 590 The Fan and 590thefan.com. We'll see you next time.